Go Jackets.
All right. Hello, all, and welcome to WreckTalk. And I want to apologize. I haven't been uploading as much as I normally do. I could tell you about that I'm busy in my work schedule and whatnot, but that would be an excuse. I need to be better about uploading if I want to hit this 1,000 subscriber mark. With that being said, if you want to support the show, we have merchandise. You can find that linked in the description. This is one of them, WreckTalk hat, which I highly recommend. Looks really good. If you want to donate to the show, there's a PayPal link and CashApp link in the description as well, which is going to be important as we move into the spring game. There's some cool things that I would like to do. Right now we're in the works, C-Dog, Bryce Coon, and I, on having a booth set up, tailgate type of thing where we do a live show. You can come meet us if you want. More information on that to come. So, today what I want to talk about, and I've watched this press conference several times. It's on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets YouTube channel. I'm going to link that in the description as well. Press conference with Buster Faulkner and Chris Weinkie. So, we're all focused on the offense, and I think for good reason. Last year, the defense was the identity of the team. The defense is really what kept us in games long enough for offense to make a play when we needed them to make a play. But if we're going to get where we need to be at Georgia Tech, we don't just need to improve on offense. That would not be a correct statement. We need a complete transformation and clear identity as an offense. It's something that we really haven't had since Collins has been there. It seemed like he had a vision for what he wanted the offense to be, but we could never materialize that. We could never dial up those plays when we needed to. And even when Key took over, and I think he did a fantastic job, but we were kind of piecemeal throwing a game plan together week to week just to get us to the next week. Try and get us a win. All right, we bought ourselves another week. Let's try and find something that'll work for the next week. That's not something that's going to work in the long term. We've got to be the ones coming into this year that sets the tone for what the offense is going to be and what we're going to do making plays. So Buster comes on, and we've all been interested to know what kind of offense Buster's going to run. Someone left a comment several days ago. I think it was Todd. Buster finally spoke. Why haven't you made a video? You're right, sir. You're right. That's on me. But I was extremely impressed with Buster and Chris Weinkie. Now, I'm already high on Chris Weinkie. I haven't seen Buster talk about Georgia Tech enough to know, to really form an educated opinion. But he began by saying, he had never worked with Brent Key, but they have often been in proximity of one another. And I think that, throughout their careers, there's been this mutual respect between the two. And that being said, I think as far as Key's colleagues, Nick Saban and George O'Leary both spoke very highly of him. I think most people in the college football world have a lot of respect for Brent Key's ability to coach football and prepare a team to win on Saturdays. That's who I would be concerned with opinions. Like those two guys that I did a reaction video, who gives an F about their opinion? It's kind of like in my job. Like if you're not in my industry, I'm not really concerned with your opinion on my ability. It'll be the same for coaches. But they did talk about that. He was asked really directly, like, what is this offense going to look like? What style of offense do you think will run? And it was kind of a coach speak non-answer, but I actually like it because I think it's honest and genuine. And he basically said, look, we're still, and this is something both him, Winkie, Brent Key, like this has all been echoed really by every coach on staff as far as it pertains to the offense. We're still trying to find what the identity of the offense is. Like we got to figure out what's going to work best. And that's what the next, few months is going to be. He said we're definitely going to tailor the offense to the strengths of our players, which is just music to our ears, because up to this point it had really been like we were trying to force a round peg into a square hole. Like we had, like 50 predetermined plays up until Key took over and Winkie was calling plays, that we were just going to do that no matter what and try and be the smartest guys in the room while not winning. But I did like that answer. Like, hey, we're still trying to find the identity. We're looking at what we have. We're taking inventory of our team. And once we figure that out, then we're going to build the offense to be what it needs to be. He did mention in today's football and college football, and I agree with this, you don't have to have Lamar Jackson at quarterback. You don't have to have C.J. Stroud athleticism at quarterback. But you do have to have some mobility at quarterback. And the nice thing with that is that we do have two quarterbacks on our team that are mobile. Haynes King is the most mobile. He's kind of a freakish athlete as a quarterback. And, Zach Pyron is no slouch and athletically either. I would think Pyron's probably a 4'6" something guy, and Haynes King's a 4'5" something 40 guy. What I'm saying is that they both have the ability to make plays with their feet, so they can pick up a first down with their feet if they need to, and they can extend a play if they need to. So pressure on the quarterback, he's able to get out of it, get outside the pocket, and make a throw, which is something that both of them I think do well, is making throws while on the run. It's difficult to do. Particularly going to your left as a right-handed quarterback, you have to open your shoulders back a little more, but I think they're both pretty good at that. And really that was what, I hate to bring up Stetson Bennett on a tech video, but it's something that he was able to do well, and I think Buster Faulkner was able to do well with him, as he was able to coach Stetson to make really good throws on the run, even on his kind of non-dominant side. I thought this was interesting too. A few things. One of the first things he said, and pay attention to this and go back and look at it. He said when he got this job, he called his wife and said, "This is the only place that I want to be." He wants to be at Georgia Tech, and that he was basically just beyond himself and over the moon about being the offensive coordinator at Georgia Tech. And I really got the sense that I think he played at Parkview, so he kind of grew up around the metro area. I got the sense that he kind of grew up with some adoration for Georgia Tech, especially in the time he would have grown up in the 90s. That was kind of a special time in Georgia Tech football. Anyways, so I know a lot of people were unhappy with him staying at UGA. I think this is a home run type hire with Buster, and I think that first of all, this is the first Division I offensive, or I wouldn't say Division I, but Power 5 OC job he's had, and I think he's got the fire, the passion. It's new. He's ready to make a statement as to what kind of coordinator that he's able to be. And he also made a point for most of the interview. I think toward the end he said UGA. He didn't mention Georgia or UGA by name, really, or it seemed like he went out of his way to avoid that. And there were questions about UGA, and he quickly pivoted it back to Georgia Tech. He didn't want it didn't seem like he wanted this to become all the great things I did at Georgia. He wanted to focus on the great things that were going to happen at Georgia Tech. And I think that was just a really good awareness of what the situation was in the interview. He said he was the luckiest man in the world, quote unquote. He said, I feel like I'm the luckiest man in the world to be at Georgia Tech. Obviously, he's asked about the quarterbacks. it is something that I haven't really thought about, but it is a good position to be in. All three of our quarterbacks have starting experience. They've all got starts before. Haynes King's been a starter at Texas A&M. Both Zachs have been starters at Georgia Tech. And for the deficiencies in Gibson's play early on, did prove that he can be a serviceable quarterback if need to be, and he can make plays when he's got to with his arm. So obviously it's going to be Pyron or Haynes King that's going to be the starter. But if the worst happens, Gibson is able to get, some meaningful reps for you at quarterback. And this was another thing that was reiterated over and over again. So one was we're still trying to find an identity as an offense, still trying to find an identity as a team. But both Winkie and Faulkner said over and over, the quarterback needs to be the toughest guy on the field, which is something that I don't know that I've heard other coaches talk about. You don't often hear toughness equated with the quarterback position. But I agree with that. And toughness, I think, at the quarterback position is not just, can I take a hit and get up, this physical toughness. There's a tremendous amount of mental toughness that comes with playing the quarterback position. Can you take a hit and get rattled and still make good decisions? Can you make a bad throw? Can you throw a pick and then come back in and not let that dominate you and change the manner in which you're playing throughout the rest of the game? Like, can you throw a pick and then not play scared and make plays when you have to moving forward? That all, to me, is part of toughness. And I think that all three quarterbacks that we have are able to do that. Buster mentioned being where your feet are, which to me is, hey, we got to stay in the moment. All we're focused on, if it's 2nd and 3, is getting up to the line of scrimmage and making the best decisions we can in the moment, getting us in the best play that we can be in if we need to audible. They both talked about the wide receiver room. Buster mentioned, and this is something we haven't really had in a long time at the wide receiver position, but I do believe we have some depth now. If you've watched the channel for any length of time, Leo Blackburn, I think, is a freak of nature athlete, and if we can get the quarterback position right, get an identity on offense where we're not just kind of forcing things to happen, Leo Blackburn can not only be an All-ACC player, he could be an All-American type player. This is a kid that very much reminds me of Kyle Pitts from Florida that's plays with the Falcons now. He's kind of a hybrid tight end, wide receiver type guy, 6'6", very fast. Watch out for him. And they both mentioned, and this is something actually C-Dog and I and Papa WreckTalk agree on, watch out for Malik Rutherford. I'm happy that he didn't end up transferring. They both said that he's a guy with an incredible work ethic and an incredible skill set. Look for him to break out this season as well. And then obviously Abdul, the kid from Duquesne, big-bodied kid, 6'3", 185. Spoke highly of him and obviously the speed of Christian Leary. Not to mention Chase Lane, not to mention the freshmen that we have coming in with like Dobson and these other kids. I mean, there's for the first time in a while a lot of excitement around the wide receiver room. Like I hate that freaking North Carolina came in and got Nate McCullum. And I hope the best for the kid, but I think we're going to be okay. I think we're going to be okay at the wide receiver position. He was also asked because Faulkner coached with Kirby. Basically, is Brent running things like Saban would or Kirby would? Which is kind of an interesting question. And basically just said, yeah, I mean, he's running he's running a program like the elite coaches in college football are. He also talked about the running back position and what his expectations were for the running back position. Number one, he spoke very highly of Norval McKenzie, and I don't remember if it was Winkie or Faulkner that had coached with him before. I think it was Winkie. I mean, it says something when you can convince a guy to leave his alma mater, which he was at Vanderbilt, to come on staff with you. Now, I know Vanderbilt is not a premier football destination necessarily, but I do think it says something that you get a guy to leave his alma mater. And look what he's already done. We've signed a 4-star running back with him already. And I think Winkie said, like, he's one of the better teachers at that position that he's coached under. But Faulkner mentioned, like, kind of like with quarterback, you can't just have a quarterback that doesn't really have mobility and throws in college football anymore. The expectation for running back per Faulkner is you've got to be able to catch the ball out of the backfield. You got to be able to block. You got to be able to you can't just be a running back in today's football either and be as successful as you'd like to be. That's what was so exciting about Ja, right? Is that aside from just being a freak of nature with speed, like, he had very, very good hands. Jahmyr Gibbs, will he go in the first round? Probably in this year's draft. And then he was also asked about Stetson. We can't get away from the Stetson Bennett talk, but just said, yeah, he was very, hopes the best for Stetson. And honestly, I think as far as Stetson starting for Georgia, that was far more a Kirby Smart decision than it was a Buster or Todd Monken. But he reiterated the toughness that the kid had, and I do think the kid's tough. I do absolutely think the kid's tough. So we'll see what we've got toughness at quarterback coming into the spring. But Winkie took the podium next. Spoke very highly of Haynes King. And I didn't know this, had recruited Haynes previously. So he already had that relationship with him, talked about his father being a high school coach, having a high football IQ. So, look, I know people make fun of Haynes King's throwing motion. The only concern I have with kind of this awkward throwing motion is how quick your release is. Can you get the ball out quick enough to get it where it needs to be? Other than that, it's kind of like your golf swing. If you swing like Charles Barkley, but you hit it straight every time and far enough, who really cares how silly it might look? I'm concerned with the results, He was asked about his relationship with Buster, which I thought was interesting. And Winkie actually said this was something, like, don't gloss over this either. Winkie was heavily involved with assembling the staff. And I think that's very interesting. That tells me that really Winkie's almost like the co-head coach to me. Like, him and Key have, a ton of respect for each other and trust and each, like, their discernment and ability. So I know Norval and A.J. Artis were huge recommendations from Winkie, and I'm sure Buster Faulkner was Winkie's, number one choice to bring in as OC. Now, Chris Winkie's now the co-OC, and he talked about really how their, convergence of knowledge is really, he didn't use this word, but I think it's special. Like, there's a lot of things that, maybe Buster is more of an expert in that Winkie isn't, and vice versa. I know Winkie has been heavly involved, like Winkie and Faulkner, with building this offense from the ground up. He was asked about the offense, and he said, yeah, we totally rebuilt from the ground up, which is absolutely, what needs to happen. Winkie definitely helped with, like, transferring verbiage over what you call different things, what different checks are called. But I think this could be a very explosive and dangerous offense just with what's coming together. Now, maybe it's not. Obviously, I'm a Tech homer. I'm Well, I don't know that I'm predispositioned to thinking it's going to work with how it's gone in the past, but it's going to be infinitely better than what we've seen. So a completely rebuilt offense is going to be super exciting to see as a Georgia Tech fan. Again, he reiterates the toughness with quarterback that Faulkner talked about and creating an identity on offense. Something else that I really like to hear is he said with all three quarterbacks, no one knows when they're getting reps with the ones. And I think that's a lesson that we learned from last year. Now obviously they didn't have the time to prepare like they are now with a full off season, but we throw Gibson and you could tell he wasn't prepared to play. So we're practicing that now. Like, hey, you're practicing with the ones now. And getting used to just kind of being thrown in the position because you never know when you're going to be. If Haynes is the starter, you don't know if he's going to go down. And then Gibson's got to come in, halfway in the third quarter when you get a 3-point lead. You've got to prepare for that sort of thing. So I was happy to hear that. Other thing that was interesting that happened is that Brent Key came in under the ruse of a reporter. And I actually thought this was genius. We talked about it on the last live show with Benjamin London and when Jujician was on. He, the question of who's the number one quarterback's going to come. And it's not a question you can answer. So I thought it was genius that Key comes in and asks the question and ask it 40 different ways. So he's like, who's going to be the starter? Well, all three could be starters. Who do you think will be the starter? Who do you want to be the starter? If you were a betting man, who would the starter be? And now you're going to look silly as a reporter if you ask that question afterwards. So Key beats him to the punch. It's the funniest thing he's done, and Key, for everything he's good at, is not comedy in one of them, but I thought that was a genius move on Key's part. Basically, all three quarterbacks. Our goal is for all three quarterbacks to be able to be inserted in the starting role and have success. We've talked about the wide receiver room. He reiterated the talent of Malik Rutherford, size of Abdul. And this was the other thing I wanted to talk about, is that you keep hearing A.J. Artis's name come up. If you watch the interview I did with Clayton Powell-Lee and Zach Pyron, they both brought up how important A.J. Artis was in their training regiment, in their development. I never even asked that. I never even thought to ask about A.J. Artis. And every interview it seems like I watch now, this guy's name is coming up. This was a guy that Winkie had worked with before, highly recommended A.J. Artis. And your strength and conditioning coach, you never really think about unless things go wrong. It's kind of like your special teams coach. No one really thinks about the special teams coach unless you're Georgia Tech last season and you're getting a punt blocked a game. But it's not something that needs to be overlooked, and that's something Winkie talked about, is that's a coach that influences every position group that you have. So you've got to get that high right. You've got to have the right guy in there developing your players, and it seems like we do. The last thing he was asked about, and I agree with him, I don't like this question. I get it. Chicks like the long ball. He was asked about arm strength. And that's something that's gonna come. There's a ceiling for a kid as far as how far he can throw. There is some natural ability there, but it's also something, again, with A.J. Artis, something you're going to work through. I agree with Winkie's take. The far more important thing than arm strength is, can you make the right decision at quarterback? Can you put the ball where it needs to be? If you have a guy in tight coverage on an out route, can you avoid throwing it behind him and lead him a little bit to the boundary? These are things that are far more important as a quarterback than can you throw it 75 yards off your knees or something. It makes me think of who was the number one pick for the Raiders that was taken over Calvin Johnson when Lane Kiffin was a coach of the Raiders. Jamarcus Russell, guy, had a lot of success in college, could throw it like 75 yards off his knees, and everyone's like, oh my God, this is great. It's not the whole story. You can't be a successful quarterback with just arm strength alone. So I don't know about you guys. I am very excited to see, particularly where this offense goes moving forward. We'll do, some more videos moving forward. I'm sure with conference realignment, we'll look at some film on Haynes King. And my plan is just to have at least a video a week moving forward. I think that's something I can certainly commit to, probably more leading right into the spring game, and certainly more when we're in season. So with that, guys, I appreciate your support, and go Jackets.